We all have the same 24 hours every single day. But if you're a trucker, your 24 hours is on a clock, and a clock that never ever stops. And when your clock runs out, you're done for the day. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, this clock is a safety measure, but it also puts a lot of constraint and a lot of thought into your daily process as a driver. So let's talk about one of my personal favorite aspects of trucking, hours of service, or HOS, and how they affect and work with every single driver on the road. Welcome to Trucking Tuesday. Hi friends, I'm Jen. And if you're new to this series or new to the channel, I work in an office at a trucking company. And I am going to present the side of the trucking world mostly from the office perspective. Hours of service is something that I've been fascinated with since I learned about getting into trucking 5 years ago. There's been a lot of changes throughout the years, but a brief history of hours of service is when trucking first started in the United States, there weren't hours of service rules and regulations, so to speak of. Drivers drove till they were tired, and that was that. Then there became what's called paper logs, and I'll show an example up here on the screen. And drivers would fill these out, and they were given their allotted amount of hours a day, and 14 hours was the limit for on duty, 11 hours for drive, and then you would have to take a break after 8 hours of driving. Now, the written logbooks were basically on the honor system. So if you were an honest driver, you would fill out your logbooks correctly, and you would show where you would start, you would show where you finished, where you took your break, where you were getting loaded, unloaded, etc. And you wouldn't drive over your allotted time. If you were a not so dishonest driver, you could adjust your logs however you felt. There wasn't a whole lot of regulation for hours of service when the program was first started by the Department of Transportation. This changed as more and more accidents were being investigated, and it was determined that drivers were being pushed to the limit. They were trying to make delivery times that were pretty much impossible. They were being pushed by dispatch or pushed by the people that they had booked the loads with. So there was a lot of attention paid to hours of service. And part of that included changing to electronic logs. Now in this country, all drivers, there's a very few minor exceptions, but pretty much any over-the-road regional or local driver has to have an electronic logging device in their truck, or ELD. If you work for a carrier, most likely if you are a company driver or a lease driver, in our case profit lease, which means we have a walk-away lease, we don't do a lease purchase type program. But if you have a lease or you're a company driver, your logbooks are operated and regulated by your carrier. And that's actually a good thing, because they can help you if there's problems with your device. The devices aren't perfect. They fail from time to time or have issues with connectivity. If you don't charge them, they're not going to work correctly. And there's different cases where things get messed up. Also, we can help you navigate situations if you have made mistakes. There's ways that we can help you deal with that in case you are pulled over and face inspection. So, what are the hours of service? Well, there's 24 hours in a day, just like anyone else. Drivers are allowed 14 hours of on duty. What's on duty? On duty includes your pre-trip and post-trip inspection. And what that is that you're doing a walk around of the vehicle, the truck and the trailer. If you have a trailer with you, you're making sure that everything is safe and roadworthy. So you're checking things like brakes, tires, mud flaps, air lines, your connections, making sure that everything's in good working order and that it's safe to roll down the road. At bare minimum, Department of Transportation says the driver should do these inspections every day when they start their day and when they shut down. Most good drivers will do at least a 15 to 20 minute pre-trip and post-trip, and a lot of drivers, just for safety reasons, because there are so many hazards on the road, construction, etc., that you can face, will do a quick walk around and at least check the tires, the mud flaps, and the major pieces of the equipment when they stop to fuel, or they stop to take a break, or they finish getting loaded or unloaded before they head out back on the road. All of this can be done on-duty status. As of a few years ago, you can now also fuel an on-duty status, and you can take your 30-minute break in on-duty status to fuel. Other reasons you would be on duty is if you're getting paperwork, you're getting loaded or unloaded, though there are some exceptions that you can go off duty for that time. If you're at your carrier, you're dropping off paperwork, you're getting things signed, you drop in to see your safety department, things like that would all be considered work on duty status. So you're allowed 14 hours of work during the day. 11 of that can be on drive. So anytime pretty much the truck and trailer are in motion, you should be on drive. The exception to this would be something called yard move. So if you're at a carrier's recognized headquarters, if you are at a shipper or a receiver and you're moving around the property, for example, some shippers and receivers require you to drop your trailer in the dock and then go park in a staging area. So you would move your trailer onto the dock and then you would go park in the staging area. That would be a legal case for using yard move. If you're going to pick up your trailer, if you're going to move the trailer from dock to dock because the shipper or receiver has asked you to, if you're at a shop getting your truck or trailer worked on and you need to move it, you can put yourself on yard move. Those are all legal cases to use yard move. You should be driving less than 5 miles per hour, and it should be only in those cases. So you can drive for 11 hours a day. After 8 hours of driving, you have to take a 30-minute break. Like I said, they recently changed it that drivers can use that 30-minute break to fuel. Otherwise, you would normally go into an off-duty status, take your 30-minute break, and then you can go back on the road. And then you have 10 hours of off-duty time that is supposed to be your rest time, and that's your 24-hour day. So, sounds pretty easy, right? You can drive, you can be on duty, you can be off for your break, and then you can be off duty. Yes, in a nutshell, HOS, or hours of service, is pretty simple. There are some interesting special statuses. Some of these are hot buttons. I understand hours of service in general tends to be a little bit of a hot button with some people because some drivers liked when things were a little more relaxed and we were on paper logs. But for safety reasons, and I'm not just talking about other drivers on the road, I'm talking about driver safety as well. Hours of service regulations have severely cut down the number of accidents that have happened because of drivers being pushed when they're tired. They've cut down the number of accidents from drivers trying to rush and get too many miles in a single day. And the only big problem that really and truly exists now is people who don't understand hours of service pushing drivers to the limit. Brokers, customers calling and saying, hey, when's my load going to get here? Or dispatch that don't recognize the importance of making sure that drivers are in tip-top shape to drive. You shouldn't be driving when you're tired. You shouldn't be pushing yourself to the absolute last minute of your hours. And if you are, then you're probably not being allowed to drive in a manner that's safe for you. So that's something that's why I'm very passionate about hours of service, because I want to make sure that our drivers are safe and they're getting the rest that they need when they're out on the road. So let's talk about special statuses, just because I think they're interesting. One big one is personal conveyance, or PC. The current laws state that you cannot use PC if you are working. So that means you can't, if you run out of hours, your regular 11 hours, you can't use PC to get to a shipper or receiver. You can't use PC to move or advance the load. If you've been on break and you go, oh, I'm only 5 miles down the road, I'll just go get there on PC. No, if you are working, you cannot legally use PC. What PC is there for is if you get someplace that you had planned on your trip plan to park, and you plan to get there at 10.5 hours of your drive time, and you get there and there's absolutely no parking, and the next closest parking is 45 minutes down the road. If you're someplace where there's not a lot of truck parking, and a lot of major cities don't have truck parking within the city limits just because they don't want the big trucks there. So it's really hard to find parking in certain places. Maybe you're somewhere that just is, it's not a very populated area and there's just not a lot of truck stops. So if the place that you have planned to park is full, sometimes you may have to put yourself on parking to go to a safe place to park. If you're carrying hazmat, there's definitely a lot more strict regulations and rules about where you can and cannot park. So you would have to go find a safe haven to park. Rest areas are far and few between now, and so they fill up very quickly. And at my carrier, we don't like our drivers parking on the side of the road or on the on or off ramps, just because it's very unsafe and it can cause accidents for both the driver and other drivers. So we try to be very conscious of where our drivers park, and if they need to use PC to park, you know, we'll let them in those cases. It shouldn't be something that they do on the regular, and most good drivers don't, but it is kind of an emergency situation. Other reasons you could use PC would be if you're going to get something to eat. Maybe you've parked at a truck stop, but you're not wanting to do fast food. You're wanting to kind of go to the grocery store and get food so you can make yourself something. Or if you're just doing your grocery restock for the week, that would be a legal case to PC. If you're going to the gym, going to the movie, something like that, that's maybe you're on your 34-hour break, and we'll get to what that is in a moment, then you can use that as a legal case for PC. Other reason to use PC is if you're parked somewhere and the police tell you that you have to move your vehicle and you don't have your time back, then you can use PC to move. Other special statuses, like I said, yard move, you can use that when you're at a shipper or receiver or leaving a shop. If, for example, if you have our truck in our shop and they want you to test drive it around the parking lot to make sure the noise that you heard or the air leak that you heard is gone, you can put yourself on yard move and move around. But most of the time, you know, if you're driving, the truck should be in drive. So we've talked about the 14-hour day that you're allowed to be on duty. We've talked about the 11 hours that you're allowed to drive and the 8-hour mark for break, and then the 10 hours off duty. So how many hours a week does a driver work? Most drivers will work as very close to what they call their 70 as possible. Drivers are allowed 70 hours of on-duty / drive time a week. So they're allowed 70 hours a week that they can work. Now they can't drive that whole 70. It's 70 hours of total on-duty time. And that's a lot when you stop and think about it. If you work full-time, most places your work week is 40 hours. Now, you may say, yeah, but they don't have to commute. Well, okay. But if they're a regional or an over-the-road driver, they're not having to commute means that they're not home. They're in their truck. So that's a pretty big sacrifice for not having to commute. But drivers are allowed to work up to 70 hours a week. Now, most drivers, when they finish their 70 or as close to their 70 as they're going to get for the week, they'll do what's called a 34-hour reset. And that means they don't do any drive time, any on-duty time, or any yard move for 34 hours. You can PC during that time. Like I said, if you need to go get something to eat, go work out, go do whatever your personal business is, visit family and friends, you're allowed to move the truck. Usually we prefer you not to do it with a trailer. If you can leave the trailer parked someplace safe, but if you have to take the trailer, you have to take the trailer. But what you do in your 34 hours is your personal time, as long as it's not work related, and you can do that on PC. Once your 34 hours is up, your 70-hour cycle will reset for the week. Now, there are some drivers that like to work what's called recaps, and that means that they won't take a 34-hour, and they can work. So let's say they started their work week on a Monday, and let's say that Monday, 7 days prior, so now it's Monday again, they drove 9 hours and 42 minutes. So at midnight, since they've worked out their whole 70, at midnight that Monday, they'll get 9 hours and 42 minutes to drive back. And then Tuesday, let's say they drove 6 hours and 15 minutes. So midnight Tuesday morning, they'll get 6 hours and 15 minutes to drive back. So recaps are a plus and a minus. Recaps are great if you're somebody that likes to drive pretty much nonstop and you're not going home very often and you can keep driving. However, if you don't drive a full day, then that limits the amount of time that you can drive. And you don't get your 14-hour clock back when you're renting recaps. You literally get back just the drive time that you drove that day. So that's your on duty and your drive time for the day. So if you only drove 4 or 5 hours, it's really not worth it for you to use recaps. So most drivers, unless they drive out 9 or 10 hours a day, won't do recaps. And honestly, you shouldn't be doing recaps all the time. You need some time out of the truck. You need some time to shut down, have your personal life, etc. So a lot of drivers, maybe they'll do recaps 1 week and then they'll do a 34 if they're somebody that likes to run on recaps. Some people like to run on recaps all the time, and that's okay, especially if they're like a regional driver that goes home every couple, like every other day. But we do encourage our guys to try to get a break from the truck once in a while, or at least a break from driving, because it's a very stressful job and you need your personal time, you need your downtime. So there's a lot to go into this. And then let's talk about the really fun experience with HOS, and that is split brakes. And there's a lot of questions that I get about this. This is one of this is probably the number one phone call I get about logbooks when I'm at work, is how do I do a split brake, or can you check my split brake? So there's 2 off-duty statuses. There's sleeper berth and off-duty. If you are a local driver, meaning that, at least at my carrier, you are paid hourly, you cannot use sleeper berth because you don't sleep in your truck. Some of our local drivers do have sleeper trucks, just in case they would have an emergency because of weather and they got stuck, that they could sleep in the truck. But for the most part, we don't allow them to use sleeper berth. They just use off-duty. Some over-the-road and regional drivers use off-duty only. Some use sleeper berth when they're taking their 10, but if they take their 34, they put themselves off-duty. But if you are doing a split, it used to be that you could only do an 8-2 split, meaning you had to take either 8 hours off or 2 hours off, and then you would get back your remaining drive time that you had left from when you stopped. So let's say out of your 11, you drove 9 hours even, so you would have 2 hours left. So if you took 8 hours off, then you would, at 8 hours and 1 minute, you would get those 2 hours back. You could drive those 2 hours, and then you would have to take the remaining 2 hours of your 10 to even out your time off. Why would someone do this, you ask? There's lots of reasons. One would be parking. There are some customers, more than you think, that actually don't allow parking on site. And there could be lots of reasons for this. It could be that they aren't open. It could be that they have a small facility. It could be that they heavily regulate the amount of traffic in and out of the facility. Maybe they have high dollar, maybe they have hazmat, and they just don't want that many trucks. So let's say you have a 2 a.m. appointment and they don't allow you to park on site. Maybe the closest truck stop is 30 miles down the road. So what you would do is plan your trip so that when you stop, you would have enough time to do a split break. And like I said, it used to be just 8 and 2. Now you can do a 7-3. So you can take 7 hours off and then do the other 3 later. So you would park somewhere nearby and leave yourself some drive time, enough to get to your shipper or receiver, shut down for the 7 or the 8 hours, get that drive time back, go drive to your shipper or receiver, and while you're getting loaded, you would put yourself back in sleeper for the 2 or the 3 hours that you still needed to take, and then your time would even out. Now, it's not perfect because you do still need to eventually take a 10 in order to A, get some rest, and B, get all of your drive time back. But it's great in those situations where parking is difficulty, or you have a early morning appointment, or you're tight on time anyway. So the split breaks are nice for that. So what is the overall point of hours of service? Well, hours of service, like I said, was originally created to keep drivers safe, because before there was a lot of regulation in how much drivers drove, drivers were driving as much as they could every single day to get from point A to point B. And they were driving while they were tired. They were driving in difficult driving situations. So traffic, bad weather, things like stressful situations. Maybe they've been sitting in an accident for hours, and that all wears on you. I mean, if you've ever taken a long car trip, you know how tiring it can be after being in the car all day long. Imagine if not only you're driving, but you're also carrying a huge load behind you. You have the pressure of when you're supposed to deliver. You have the pressure of being away from your family. You have the pressure of your dispatch calling and saying, hey, do you want to do 4 more loads this week? Do you want to not go home this weekend? Or whatever conversation they're having with you. So hours of service originally was mostly designed to protect the drivers from driving tired and in turn protect other people on the road. But I like to look at hours of service as ultimately protecting the driver's work-life balance in addition to safety. Safety, of course, being the number one reason for hours of service, but allowing drivers to have a work-life balance. I work 12 on, 12 off, and I know how hard it is by the time I get to the end of my rotation. And the fact that I miss out on life. I miss seeing my spouse because I leave for work about an hour and a half before my shift because I like to get there early. So I leave for work 30 minutes early, but I get up an hour and a half before my shift and then I leave. So I'm there 30 minutes early. I work my shift and then I have my commute home. So I'm basically gone 14 and a half hours a day. And then I have to come home, relax, maybe get something to eat and get some sleep, and then get up, get ready, do the whole thing all over again. So my downtime is precious to me, and I don't have the world's greatest work-life balance when I'm on my 4 days on. And my 4 days off are very precious to me. Drivers, if they're working out their 70, their work-life balance is tough. I mean, when you're on duty basically 14 hours a day, that's a long time, and sometimes it's longer than that. And there's some exceptions with your on-duty time. So if you are getting live unloaded or live loaded and it's going to be a long time, you are allowed to put yourself in off-duty status while you're waiting. As long as you're not doing anything work related. You're not getting paperwork, you're not, if you're somebody that helps with the loading, there are some companies where you do full touch or partial touch, which means that you're helping with the loading or unloading in some manner. The company that I work for, we have no touch freight, which means that we're never helping with the loading or the unloading. The drivers may have to drop and hook trailers, which means they drop a empty trailer and pick up a loaded trailer. So you have to do your trailer hookup, and all of that should be on duty. But if you're getting live loaded and it's taking a long time, as long as you're not doing anything personally to help with that loading or unloading process or getting your paperwork, you can be in off-duty status and you can do whatever you want. You can take a nap if you're somebody that can sleep through them being in and out of the trailer. You can talk to family, friends, whatever you do in your personal time. But let's just face it, you're away from home, you're in your truck, life is still going on around you. So it's hard when you're working, 60, 70 hours a week. It's hard to have any kind of work-life balance, and ensuring that you have to take those 10 hours off at least gives you some break from your workday. And 10 hours really goes by very quick because you think about all the things that you have to do. Shower, if you need to do laundry, you need to eat, you need to decompress. So call family, call friends, play video games, read a book, whatever it is that you do to relax, and then sleep too. And, or work out and anything else that you need to do. 10 hours goes by really, really quick. Now, if you're on a load where you have some time in the load, then you can take a little more time off. But most loads, it's built in that you're only going to take a 10. And, if you're not moving, you're not making money. So if you have the opportunity to drive after your 10, most drivers will drive so that they can finish the load that they're on, get on another load, and keep making money. So that 10 hours goes by very, very quick. So the nice thing about having the hours of service regulations is that it ensures that drivers get some time away from behind the wheel and get a chance to get a break and relax and de-stress and, be fresh and ready to go the next day. So, as far as times that people drive, hours of service really doesn't have any regulations with that, unless you're driving hazmat. That may affect the time that you can drive, but for the most part, hours of service does not affect the hours that you can drive. So how are hours of service regulated? So hours of service are regulated with your electronic log device. It shows you, most of them, depending on, some count up, some count down. The system that we use, it counts down. So it shows you 70 hours at the start of your week and it'll count down. Your 14 hours when it starts, it'll count down. Your 11 hours, it will count down. And then the 8-hour clock to your break, it'll count down. Like I said, some of them count up. There's lots and lots of systems out there. And all of them have their ups and downs. The system that we're currently using, I really like, just because it's fairly easy to make any corrections. But so your electronic log device holds you accountable. And these electronic log devices, if you are ever pulled over for any reason, or you're given a random inspection by a DOT officer, they can download your logs and go over them. How deeply they go over them, that's up to you and the level of the inspection that they're giving you. But sometimes they'll just kind of glance at them. Sometimes they'll go over them with a fine-tooth comb. And they can pull down a week at a time. At least with the system that we're on, you can pull down, the officers can pull down a week at a time, and we can send the drivers a week at a time. Other ways they're regulated is if you're in an accident, the last 6 months of your logs can be reviewed by insurance and police investigators, anybody that's involved in the accident investigation. All of that can be reviewed, and they're very serious about these, especially in cases of accidents. They'll look and see if you've had any violations. So if you went over your drive time at any time within the last 6 months, that can change the whole outcome of an accident. So that's how hours of service are regulated. So what happens when there's mistakes? Let's say you have your truck in the shop, they move your truck, and it throws your truck into drive. That is a legal case where we can make a change and edit that log. However, anything that goes on the drive line will make a mark on your log. And when we change that, we notate it so that if a officer or someone investigating an accident, or your logs books in general, reviewed it, they would know why we made that change. Or if you were on PC and your device tripped up and it accidentally put you on the drive line, then we can fix that as well, as long as, you know, we know for sure that that's what you were doing, that you were on PC. And we verify, we can verify by looking at where you are GPS. So, you know, I can tell if you're sitting over at Walmart or if you're at your receiver, and then we can adjust that as needed. So there are ways to adjust if there are any mistakes. So, but that's kind of HOS as an overview. I know that's a lot of information all at once, but it's something that I'm truly fascinated with, because I think it truly is a good thing for the industry, in the fact that it gives the drivers the opportunity to take care of themselves, do what they need to do, take breaks as needed. And it also should, in most cases, ensure that those of us in the office are taking care of our drivers and making sure that they are driving safely and in a manner that lets them take care of themselves. No one in dispatch, no one in the office, actually no one in the transportation business at all, should ever ask a driver to violate or falsify their logs. That's incredibly illegal and incredibly dangerous. And because ELD is so heavily regulated, and HOS in general is so heavily regulated, it's not something that people normally do. You do hear the horror stories about dispatch telling drivers to drive when it's unsafe. And even if it's not related to hours, even if drivers have hours to drive and they just don't feel safe because they're tired or they're not feeling well or the weather's bad, they should never be forced to drive. But hours of service is definitely something you would never, ever ask a driver to violate. So I hope this has given you an insight into the clock that never stops. I know when I was at Walmart and they were bringing us our trucks, most of our trucks were dropped off, and then the drivers would come and pick up the empty trailer and drop off a loaded trailer. But every now and then we would have to do a live unload, and the driver would have to wait. And they would get very frustrated when we weren't unloading fast enough. And I never understood why. I never understood why they were so pressured. And now I do. It's because their clock never stops. Once it starts, you cannot stop it. Once their time is out, that's it. And you can't fix it. You can't go back and undo it. There's no magic wand to fix it. So that's why drivers are always under such pressure, is because their clock never ever stops. So thank you for joining me. If you have questions about this, please feel free to ask. If I don't know, I'll definitely do my best to give you an answer. But if you're a driver, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk about something you'd like to talk about. If you're someone that is curious about the industry, feel free to ask. And I'd love to cover any topics that you're curious about. But we'll do this again very, very soon, as in next Tuesday, and we'll talk about a new and exciting topic. Until then, stay safe out there, and remember, you matter as a driver. You keep our countries, our businesses moving, and without you, everything would come to a stop. So we truly appreciate you. Have a great day, guys.